Before I introduce our esteemed panel for today, I just want to let everybody know that you're all obviously very welcome to the latest in our series of free workshops and webinars that Bow Street have been running this summer, supported by Screen Skills Ireland. So let me introduce our panel. Let's start with Dr. Susan Liddy, who lectures in the Department of Media and Communication Studies in MIC, University of Limerick. Her research interests relate primarily to gender issues in the Irish film industry, motherhood, and the film industry, and the representation of older women on screen and behind the camera. Susan is chair of Women in Film and Television Ireland and an advisory board member on Women in Film and Television International. She's a board member of the Writers Guild of Ireland and chair of their Equity Action Committee, EAC. And she's also a board member of the recently established Raising Films Ireland, which is a really interesting initiative, and maybe you might talk a little bit about that as well, Susan. Mm-hmm. Women in International Film Industry, Policy, Practice and Power, and recently published as well, if I'm not mistaken. Demi, you might recognize as best known for her hysterical role as Linda in the RTE BBC produced comedy series The Young Offenders. Born in Nigeria and raised in Mallow, she was named by the Irish Examiner in 2018 as one of their annual Ones to Watch. Shortly after, she broadened her appeal as she became the youngest contestant on Dancing with the Stars. I hope there's no injuries after that, Demi.
No, there's no injuries at all, no.
Excellent. In a recent interview, she said, "I don't want to get booked for roles just because of the color of my skin. You should credit me for my talent." And as someone with endless amounts of talent, I think we'll be seeing should be getting endless credit for a long time to come. Seán, who's very quietly hiding it, well, in my screen is the top left-hand corner, is the head of programming at Gaze International LGBTQ Film Festival. He's previously worked with the London Film Festival, Fringe, Queer Film and Arts Fest, and independently with the Cinema Museum. As well as film exhibition, he manages heritage projects for the London Borough of Islington. And also with us is Stephanie Broocks, who was born and raised in Cameroon and grew up in France. She's been in Ireland based in Ireland for more than 8 years. She's always been passionate about the film industry, so decided to create her own agency, and especially an agency who proudly represents a wide range of diverse actors of different ethnicities and nationalities across Europe. And our facilitator host as well for the session, the wonderful Esther McCarthy, who's worked as a journalist for over 3 decades. I can't believe you put that in, Esther. She largely writes on film and TV for several Irish publications, including the Irish Examiner and Independent News and Media. She is the film reviewer on the Moncrief show's Movies and Booze Hour on News Talk. Sober today, she is Ireland's correspondent for film trade publication Screen International. You're all very welcome. I understand that time is probably the most valuable commodity all of you have, so we're really grateful for you taking the time to participate on this webinar. So Esther, over to you.
Thanks, Jimmy. So I did what any journalist would do when I started on all this. I looked up diversity in the dictionary and found what a diverse word it is, because it applies to so many different areas of life. And I think it would be nice to maybe start a little broadly and then narrow into specific areas that are impacting on the participants maybe, or that the participants would like to talk more about. So I thought we'd start by speaking to our panelists about their own career path and maybe any adversity you might have met along the way. I'd be interested in talking to you, Susan, about why you particularly developed an interest in women in film and their representation in Irish cinema.
Hi, Esther. Great to connect with you after. Yours is one of those voices, isn't it? Where everybody knows that voice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look, I think probably at the minute there might be a sense that, gender has been so talked about in recent times. We all get it, we all know it, and it's all sorted. First of all, I would take issue with that. I don't think it's all sorted, but I think a lot has been done, and there's pretty good focus on it. But when I started really digging into things was 2014, and at that stage, to be honest, I was probably the first to campaign for statistics to be kept. There weren't any statistics. So when it came to researching what the then Irish Film Board thought about the fact that there was really no women making films. I mean, when you look at the stats, it's madness. It was like 1993 to 2013, 13% of Irish or Irish-based screenwriters and writer-directors were attached to films, something like 19% of directors, and so on. So I went along to say, well, you know, is there a problem with this? And at that time, you know, the response was, well, of course, we don't have any stats, so we can't really engage in a really reasonable, you know, detailed way with you, but we kind of think there's no problem. That was, in a nutshell, certainly many voices said that. And I did feel that was completely unacceptable. And I think that's kind of internationally accepted now. Stats has to be the first thing, because you can't see what's going on unless you have them. And so I suppose through 2014, and into 2015, I was doing this research by interviewing, as I say, the members of the board, of that board, that's now Screen Ireland at the time, trying to figure out what they thought. And there was a range of new voices had just come in. There was some support starting to be there. But generally speaking, there were still some of the old school voices of, we can't afford it, we couldn't do it, we're not able to do it, why do we want it, we know everything's okay. Anytime we go into a room, there's plenty of women there. Things that seem laughable now, because of course, you know, we don't think like that anymore. So that's how I got into it, Esther. And, you know, I published research, then I got involved, and I met various people who asked me to become involved. You know, I wrote a bit for Film Ireland. That around the time of Waking the Feminists, I wrote to the Irish Times, which was a letter that caused quite a stir up, because I was saying publicly, the film board, you know, are as bad. Look at the stats, look what they're not doing. And very quickly after that, of course, they did start doing something. So I suppose it was research that brought me in. And initially, I suppose it's a great thing when, you know, when you see movements starting now, because what is the thing that unites all those movements? I think it's anger. When you get really cross and you go, are you trying to pull the wool over my eyes here? You know what I mean? What are you doing? I don't distract this to particular people. I'm just saying generally, I think whether it's researchers or campaigners, you start feeling angry at things, and you start feeling angry when you're not getting the answers. And I became involved with the Writers Guild particularly, and over time became involved with Women in Film and Television here, brought out a book. I edited 2 collections, one on Irish film industry, and the other just at the weekend was launched, a book on the international industry. So I suppose my work is activism, a bit of it, and researching. And through the research, you end up finding out, of course, that you know, Ireland is just part of the global picture. Same difficulties, and in fact, to be fair, and we can probably talk more about that again, the current Screen Ireland, I have to say, and the BAI have both gone a ways. They have policies, they have initiatives, and I think that they have responded in quite a positive way. That's not to say there isn't loads more to be done, and I think there is around diversity and inclusion, and there's still, the gender issue still isn't solved, but it's gone a long way to do that, and I think it's only fair to acknowledge that as well.
Mm-hmm. Are we moving fast enough, do you think? And how do we compare? I know a lot of your recent research for the book would have been international.
Yeah.
How do we compare to other countries? Because it is, of course, a global issue, isn't it?
It is a global issue. Well, I mean, I'm just looking here in front of me, and I know that probably everybody knows this, but just before I go on to the international one, I know that we all know about those, you know, celluloid ceiling stats and so on. But if you just look at last year, 2019, the top 250 domestic grossing films in the US, 13% women directors, 19% writers, 27% producers. I know we can all say, oh, that's over there, whatever. Now, if you come back to internationally, I'm not going to throw any more stats at you, but I'm going to say this. This is the picture internationally. Women are finding it harder to get funded for their project. When they do get funded, they get less money. The chances are they're going to get the money for the shorts, the small docs, the low budget features. And even when public funders particularly make announcements internationally about how they're doing, it very often is a head count. So that when you actually dig a little deeper, you can have it sounding pretty good that X number of women were funded. And when you actually investigate closer, you see that in fact, the money is never the same. So there's that issue. So I think it's really slow, Esther. And I understand that part of that is because it's like everything, you know, it's a machine that moves slowly. And again, I wouldn't want to be seen to be picking at Screen Ireland, who, you know, we've engaged with all the stakeholders that I've been involved with. I think we have engaged with it. There would have been some things we would have done differently, some things we would have requested that didn't happen, but there was a lot of things that did happen. And I do want to make that clear. At the minute, we don't know how the initiatives they put in place are doing, because you have things like, you know, the Enhanced Production Fund, you have the POV scheme, all of these things. Unfortunately, COVID kind of stepped in, and we haven't been able to see how these things have developed. So we don't know. It's a kind of a bad moment to assess. Certainly the stats for 2019 were pretty good. They were up a good ways. Was that an exceptional year, or was that a signal that the dial is moving? The jury's out, we just don't know yet. But there has been movement. It's slower than I would wish, but there has been movement here. Internationally, it's a bit of the same old song, though.
Is part of the problem, do you think, and tell me if you disagree, but is part of the problem an industry-specific problem in that it takes years to get a first feature made if you're lucky enough to get one made, and you usually move up through the ranks as an editor or a writer or short filmmaker? Is part of the problem that there is simply a lag in the industry that you are operating in?
Yeah, you know, I want to agree and say, yes, that's the case. I want to actually believe that that's the case. I really do. I don't know, because I think when you look at other sectors too, you will see any movement for change. You got to be careful to keep pushing the ball, because there is rollback. And if you look even at the US stats, they appear to be up one year, and then you look back, for instance, those stats that I gave you a minute ago, they're only up a couple of miserable percentage points from 1998. So actually we get a bit excitable when we see, like, you know, studio brings in, there's a, you know, protagonist, a female, we all get a bit excited. Then we all get a bit despairing when the Oscars, you know, lineup comes out or whatever. The reality is that it's moving very slowly, and maybe that's partly, you might say, well, that's just the way of the industry. If we hang on, it'll catch up. I don't see any evidence that says that that's necessarily the case. Filmmaking isn't the only area that we see problems for women. And we've only got to look at politics and, you know, the workplace and how long it took to get reproductive rights in this country. I mean, so, you know, it's not, I think the thing about the film industry is that because there's so much money involved, and because you're falling back then on this notion of, geez, there's a lot of money involved here, who's the best person to carry that? Who, you know, and it's the people you know and the people that you believe will pull the project through. And very often we don't associate leadership with women. We don't associate taking the risk with women. And, you know, a lot of directors have talked, you know, confidentially about that. I mean, one director talked about going into work in the morning, in an international landscape, armed, ready and prepared to fight. Jesus, I mean, you know, on top of all the other things you have to, that seems a burden to take on. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening around just patriarchal traditions. You know, there's no escaping that word that seems terribly old-fashioned in a way, but I think you have to come back to that. And you look at the society we live in, you know, it is a struggle for women to, and I say women, I am so aware this is a wider conversation. I'm so aware women isn't one thing, and I'm so aware that I'm probably talking from, you know, where I'm coming from. But at the same time, I have to say, and then I'll step back, Esther, I have to say this. Women do comprise, what, 51 or 2% of the population in this country. So I don't apologize for making a starting point saying, where are the women? I think that's reasonable. I would never have wanted 50% of women who all looked the same to be the 50%. So I would be kind of looking at the BFI's diversity standards, for instance, and saying within that 50%, let's get a range of voices. I'm all for the range of voices. I think that's the most wonderful thing. And we each of us have sort of, I suppose, slight preferences, in, you know, in the kind of who's been excluded, who do I hate being excluded more than maybe. Everyone's got their thing. I mean, you want all of the voices there. For instance, for me, probably being an older woman, I want to see more older women in there. I want to see them, and they vanish. As Gina Davis said recently, I turned 40 and I fell off the cliff. But that's a whole other topic. You see, the trouble with this is there's so many bloody topics that, Esther, when you said it's going to fly by, I think you were right there. So I think I've said quite enough now. There's so many others to speak.
I would like to just maybe to bring in something though, Susan, if you may, because this relates directly to you. Because when I was doing my looking up diversity thing, I think an element came in that I might have thought of, which is class, diversity of class. And traditionally, I suppose, Ireland hasn't been great in that regard. Would you agree? I was speaking recently to Shelley Love as well. It's an international issue, I know, because Shelley Love, if you don't know, if you haven't seen her film, it's lovely, a film called A Bump Along the Way. It's just a sweet little film. And her first feature. But she said to me, as a working class woman from Scotland, she would not have had a hope of getting the cameras rolling in that. As a single mother, again, another issue there. And it was only because of Raising Films stepping in at a late stage. I think she'd actually told Northern Ireland Screen that she was going to have to walk away from the project prior to production. And only for them stepping in, it might have been impossible. So can you tell us maybe where we're at in Ireland in terms of class and what?
I don't have a huge load of stats behind me on class, Esther. I can just say this: you don't just have to look at filmmaking. I mean, you can even look at education and see that we like to think we're classless in Ireland. You know, we like to think that it's completely different from England, which is so class-ridden, and we're hail fellow, well met here. Clearly, that isn't the case, and it's like everything else. It is. Have you got the money to enter education and training, which is required? A certain amount of money is definitely required. Do you have the contacts? Do you perceive yourself to be? Because a lot of the research has thrown up the ways that women can feel on the outside. Now I'm talking about women generally there, because I mean obviously I didn't in the work that I've done say to them, get much about their background in terms of class, but there is that sense of being an outsider trying to get in. So I can say to you, while I have no work specifically on class done, I can imagine that it's layer upon layer is what you're looking at there, and it's multiple layers of feeling outside. And I'm delighted to hear that Raising Films UK was of some assistance there, because I mean obviously, and this may not be the moment to talk about it, but obviously it was just launched 2 weeks ago in screen talks with the where I was in conversation with Hope Dixon Leach, the director and the co-founder of Raising Films UK, to launch Raising Films Ireland. So we're full of hope that that's going to be a wonderful ally to gather together a community of people, I think, as time goes by.
Just for people who mightn't know, in a nutshell, they're involved in support networks, but also providing direct funding to mostly single parents. Is that correct? In the UK, you see, the UK are completely different to us. So they probably are established now 5 or 6 years. So they probably do have a little bit of bursaries to give out. They certainly promote, they certainly have gatherings, they do an awful lot. In Ireland, we're only kicking off. So actually at the moment, the only thing that we have a website, we're looking for people, we're looking for testimonials, we're looking for people to come on board. But the first thing we have to do in Ireland is to actually assess the problem. Now, I have been involved in work around motherhood in Ireland, but that's qualitative work. That's like talking to small numbers of women and kind of teasing out the experience. And it was women in my case, by the way. Whereas Raising Films Ireland are speaking about parents and caring. So even though, I suppose, to be realistic here, I suppose the reality is that, as we know, women primarily are the carers, but nonetheless, many fathers are carers and have problems and issues, and they certainly are part of this. So we've got to find out what the issue is in Ireland, what the needs are in Ireland, as to we can't make assumptions that we're like the UK. So before we move forward and talking about assisting different people, which would be lovely to think we could do that going forward, we have to know who are we talking about, what are the real issues, and how many people do those issues affect. So that's our first stage. Yeah, you're only getting started, says you.
Listen, you push the boat out.
Yeah, it's great to see it here, and I think it's a very positive step for the industry.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Maybe can we talk to you, Demi, maybe about your own career paths? Can I first of all thank you for the new series of Young Offenders?
Thanks very much.
Between your good selves and Conal and Marianne, you're getting me through the pandemic. So thanks, first of all. Can we talk maybe about that lovely Debs episode and how your background was represented in that in the most lovely and natural way? Whose idea was that?
So basically, for the costume, I was just after having my own Debs. So then the costume designer, Lara, came up to me. She was like, let's see your Debs dress. I'm super excited. So I showed her my own. It's very straightforward. It was just like an emerald green gown. Very straightforward, nothing crazy. Your stereotypical Debs dress. So then she came up to me. She's like, do you want to go crazy for the series? And I was like, what do you mean by crazy? She was like, let's go all out. I want to really show Lyra or a lot. Show Linda's culture and her background and her heritage. And I was like, okay, like, we can do this. I have no problem. She spoke to Peter Foot, the director and the writer, and he was like, yeah, whatever Demi wants, give it to her. She's earned it. And I was like, grand. So it took weeks to pick out the design, the color, the print. We didn't even know where Linda was originally from. So we just assumed she was Nigerian because I'm Nigerian myself. So we were like, right, we're just going to go off of that. Because originally, when I got casted for the role, Linda was not supposed to be black. Linda was supposed to be like Irish, like Siobhan, Orla and Barry. But obviously, I must have made Peter Foot laugh a lot and he gave me the role and so on. But then we came across the idea. We came up with the pattern, we did everything. And then once we did that, we had to kind of tie it in the script. And it took weeks of begging, saying that I'm wearing an African print dress. We need to at least mention it in the script because it wasn't supposed to happen. Is there any way we can do something? And then we just improvised a few things and it just stuck. And then we went with it. And the reaction has been absolutely fantastic. People love the idea. People were fascinated, like they've never seen anything like that, especially on television, which is super strange because I've seen it so much growing up. Girls in my town have worn dresses like that to their own Debs, but it just shows that like there's not that much representation on the television for people to be like, wow, look, she's wearing an African print dress, that isn't a dashiki, this is so crazy, this is but besides that, the response has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. It does underscore the problem, though, doesn't it? That that it was notable because it was unusual.
It was. Like, I remember when I first got casted for the role, obviously, I hadn't seen anyone like me on the television before. I hadn't seen a black woman. I hadn't seen anyone with my kind of accent, my background, whatever the case would be. I had never seen it on the television before, on any form of Irish media, which was very discouraging growing up as a young girl in Ireland and seeing people in your terrace the exact same like you, but you don't see it on the television. So because of that, my father was like, you know what, don't even think about it. They're not going to accept you. Go away and be something else, like a doctor or a teacher. And I was like, right, I'm going to be a teacher. When I got casted for the role and then when the show actually aired for the first season, the amount, and it still makes me emotional talking about it, the amount of young girls, young teenagers, adults who are the same color of me or from the same background as me, who saw me and were like, I didn't think they were actually going to cast someone like us for the television series, like for Irish television. And I was like, wow. And then I had little girls telling me that they look up to me, that they want to be me when they grow up, and that they're happy that they see someone like me on the television. And obviously, I wasn't even 18, I was 17 at the time. And for me to carry on the responsibility to pave the way for the next generation to come is a lot of responsibility, but it's something that I never thought I'd see myself do, and I'm super grateful for it. When the whole Black Lives Matter movement happened, there's not many Irish or Black Irish creators in Ireland, and a few of us had obviously taken to social media and spoken about the backlash or the racism that we've gotten. And there's this one musician called Soleil. She's French. I think she's Cameroonian. I'm not 100% sure, or Congolese, something along those lines. And she taken to Twitter and she tweeted, oh, we want to see more Black teachers, more Black police officers. We want it to be normal. We want a proper representation of our communities on the television and on the streets. Like, it should be normal. You shouldn't associate a Black person with selling drugs or doing fraud or anything of the sort. We're normal people like anyone else. And with young offenders, I feel like it shows that Linda, first of all, is nothing like the boys. She's not a criminal. She doesn't even smoke a cigarette. She swears all the time like everyone else. But apart from that, she doesn't live up to the stereotype, which is very refreshing. And I hope that it can shine a light and show that we're the exact same as everyone else. We have the odd few bad apples in the basket, but we're completely normal. Do you know what I mean?
I think we can safely say that Linda's a lover, not a fighter, can't we?
That she is.
In terms of like you know, you've gained a lot of experience in a short period of time in the industry. You know, three series of TV show, feature film. Where do you think we are now in terms of racial diversity on screen, and what would you like to see going forward?
I think we're fine. We're nowhere near the UK and America. Nowhere near. I've obviously, like you said, I've had a few experience and I've had a few auditions here and there. But what I realized is the auditions are not for Ireland, they're for the UK, which is very, obviously it's fucking class, but it's like, why isn't there a lot of like TV shows showing what are, like something along the young offenders line, like it's our community, these are like things you would normally see on television, that it's completely normal. Why don't we have that over here? And I feel like it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a lot of pushing and fighting, which I've been fighting for my whole life. And I feel like I have another 20 years left in me until I just like, you know what, I'm just going to move elsewhere because I can't do this anymore. But I think that it's just going to take a lot of fighting and showing that we need to match, like, the way I see it is like, we've something like Fair City over here. We need to show that our communities are not 100% whitewashed. Like, we're not the stereotypical blonde, blue-eyed white woman and tall Irish fellow who plays Ga. Like, we're completely different. We have different backgrounds. We have people with different sexual orientations. We've older people. Like, we've so much going on in a community that we should have 100% representation on the TV screens, which comes in with a blessing in disguise, in the sense that I've started writing. I'm not a great writer, so I'm not going to tell you what I'm writing about, but I started writing, and I hope that if airs, or if my show goes on television, that it shows 100% diversity, and it shows that there is a lot more in our communities than what is shown on the television.
High fives to you. Make it work for yourself. Well done. When we're all gone, I'll be wanting to know the story, okay?
I literally want to, don't worry.
Stephanie, maybe we could bring you in at this point, because you've decided to set up your own agency, haven't you, to try and encourage greater diversity on screen. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so hi everyone. I've been based in Cork when I landed in Ireland, and I stayed there for like 5 years. So my own career path, I took over one previous agency, and the previous manager, when I look at the board, there were only Irish actors. And for me, it wasn't Ireland. Like, that's not what Ireland represents for me. And as a Black woman, that's what I wanted to see as well. I'm fighting for that, and I will keep pushing for that. So I want diversity. I want everyone to see that Ireland is not only about Irish actors, and I mean white actors. So 3 years ago, I rebranded everything. So I created my own agency with my name on it. And I also represent a lot of BAME actors out there. So Black, Asians, minority ethnicity, sorry. So like Demi said, I still feel like Ireland has a long way to go in terms of diversity and inclusion. And that's my job as well, to push for it and fight for it. So yeah. That's basically me. I can't hear you, Esther, sorry. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'd muted. Congratulations on what I'm sure is probably a gap in the industry, in finding that and establishing it. Was it difficult in the early days to establish yourself, and what reaction did you get when you said you were doing this within the industry?
Yes, it was really hard because I just became an agent 3 years ago. I used to work at Apple in Cork, so like nothing to do. I wasn't even in the film industry before. So at the beginning, I wanted to be an actress, and then I understand it wasn't for me. So that's why I went into being an agent. So when I started my own agency, I was in Cork, and there was nothing happening in Cork. And I knew that everyone was like, all the big casting directors were in Dublin. So that's why I decided to make the big move and move to Dublin. But it was really hard because I didn't have any connection. No one knows me. Like, no one knew the agency. And like it goes for the actors as well. Like when I had to introduce myself to the actors, like actually I had to sell myself and show them, okay, this is me and this is what I'm fighting for, because they didn't hear from me. And they were like, okay, but like, will you get us any job? Like, who do you know in Dublin? Do you know any casting director here or even in UK or elsewhere? So it was really, really hard. So I'll say the first maybe first year, it was all about building relationship and making myself know out there. So yeah, it wasn't easy, but we're getting there.
I didn't know you lived in Cork, and between yourself and Demi and myself being from Cork, I might have to admit to a little bit of unconscious bias at this point.
Yes, 5 years in Cork.
Seán, can we talk from the festival aspect? And also, I believe you're based in the UK, aren't you?
Yeah, also I forgot I was on this panel because I was just enjoying everyone else's contribution. So thanks for reminding me that I have to say something.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm binational, meaning that technically I live in London and I've lived here for about 10 years. But as of about 2 years ago, I've started working in Ireland again. So it's very good to kind of reconnect, with the country and the culture that is, a big part of my life, while also kind of seeing firsthand how things are done over here and having a compare and contrast situation. But yeah, I work in film festivals. I'm the film festival world, like it does still play a very important part. LGBT film festivals especially are a different kettle of fish, but still play a major important part as well. But I'm the last rung on the ladder in terms of like the promotion of screen arts, in the sense that what I get is a finished product that has been made and, with the potential to be screened to an audience. And, it was great to listen to Susan, Demi and Stephanie. And actually, Susan said something in particular, when Susan was like, oh, I know I'm speaking on behalf of being a woman here. I don't want to have, I don't want to apologize for championing the roles of women. But like, I don't think anyone should be apologizing for anything here, because the thing about diversity is, like, we're talking about diversity. It's not a single issue concept or topic, and it's like LGBTQ plus. I use queer, whatever acronyms you want to use. Like, we're not a monolith either, and in fact, you get the most diverse people because yes, it comes down to maybe a gender. Let's just focus on sexual identity for a moment in terms of like who you're attracted to, but we're talking about people who view themselves as men, women, gender non-binary, transgender, but also every race, nationality, in existence. So when I put together a film festival, yes, I'm looking for diversity, but not because I think I'm looking for it to kind of check a box, but because I'm first and foremost a viewer of film. Like, what do I want to see? Yes, I want to see myself represented because, we go through life looking at the majority of the world, and we want to see a little bit of ourselves. But I'm a person who enjoys, culture and art, and I want to see something a bit different. I want to see the Black lesbian perspective. I want to see the Brazilian trans perspective. And I want a little bit of like cute boys falling in love at the same time, so it's all kind of like working towards that. And I'm a big believer in, like, I think one of the traps we can fall into now is looking at the issue of diversity and looking at kind of eliminating the symptoms but not the causes, and even though it's great to see representation on the screen, most definitely in the form of actors, but I think we need to take a step even further back and talk about who are making the decisions, who are the writers, who are the writers first of all, who are the directors, but who are the producers, who are the financiers of what gets made. And Susan was talking an awful lot about like the statistics of US US filmmaking from the last couple of years. And the sad thing is that you know, the film industry, the big film industry, it's not full of risk takers at all. You know, it's full of people who want to make money. And the problem, the core problem, and I don't want to bring everything back to the evils of capitalism here, but one of the core problems here is that film versus, say, something like poetry is a commercial art form, okay? It needs to make money because it costs an awful lot of money to make in the first place. And it costs an awful lot of people to make, you know, from everyone from the writer to the marketing people to the cinemas to the paying the rent for those cinemas, you know? And so, like, in many ways, you know, I don't look towards US filmmaking for any kind, like US major filmmaking for any kind of ambition or risk-taking whatsoever. You know, the funny thing, I was thinking about Moonlight an awful lot, which won the Oscar a few years ago, which is in many ways, you know, that's filmed an outlier. Like, that's not going to happen again for quite some time, you know, because the Oscars also know now, oh, we've done it, you know, and they've done an awful lot of work to diversify their voting body. And I'm very happy to say that many filmmakers, well, some filmmakers who have had their films shown in gays have been now appointed to the Academy. So it's still going to be a very slow and steady progress there. But so what is the role of the festivals? Well, you know, we work to present, in many ways, I like to think it's in many ways the most artistically diverse, creative, labor of love, quality filmmaking that gets out there. Do you know, think about, like, LGBT film festivals often have kind of a community feel about them, and you know, gays is also that as well, because we're a community of people in Ireland and of community of LGBT people and cinema goers, you know. But there's always kind of a varying level of quality. But like, I think one of my kind of responsibilities is that, yes, I want to speak to the community, but I also want to present, you know, expertly well-made films to audiences. And so it's very much films, like, you know, films, there's kind of two kinds of films that I'm drawn to the most: films that are made under very difficult circumstances, and films often that are made, you know, out towards Europe an awful lot, because, you know, the European funding bodies, there's obviously diversity initiatives there, and you know, the co-productions will get films made that in many ways won't turn a profit all the time because there's funding bodies that exist, you know. And I'm just thinking, I can't, our program will be out in about a week, I should say, so I can't really give any hints here. But, you know, I'm just thinking of the films that, you know, we're going to be showing this year. You know, and obviously we go to, well, in a normal year, we would go to a few festivals. We got to go to Berlin this year, and then everything happened, as you know. And so a few of some of my favorite films have come from the Berlin Film Festival this year. You know, so the role of the film festival is to kind of like get the ball rolling, to propagate these things, and to ensure that enough people, enough audiences get to see them and respond to them. And, you know, I would like to say that, you know, the small European art film festival, the queer film festival, can like turn the career around of someone. Like, yes and no, they're not going to be directing at the next Marvel movie, you know, but like, I was just thinking about Patty Jenkins today. You know, didn't she direct Monster? Was that her?
That was her, yeah.
You know, like, look at her career. She has really, like, you know, slogged it for some time, and now she's directing the Wonder Woman films, okay? But, you know, but that is like that's a hard slog. I look at the men who are directing these Jurassic World films, and I think, oh, they've done one other film. How interesting that they've got this job, you know? And there's people like Kimberly Peirce and Patty Jenkins who have been like, you know, where's their, I mean, Patty Jenkins got her big one, you know, Kimberly Peirce has got a couple over the years, but where are theirs? Where's Dee Reese's big action movies, you know? Like, there's an awful lot of bias that exists. And, you know, if we're talking about Ireland a little bit, you know, we talk about gender diversity, but like, you know, what's our minority community on our doorstep? Well, it's members of the traveling community. Do you know? I'd like to see more representation of members of the traveling community on screen. And, you know, we've had a couple of short films that have been about LGBT travelers. But that's something that, you know, Ireland really, like, this is what I'm talking about, the symptoms here, you know. Diversity is not the same thing in every country. If we want to talk about diversity in Ireland, we should also be, we're talking about, first of all, gender diversity, of course, but also we need to think about our own, you know, the ethnic communities that have been, you know, fighting for their rights to exist for a long time. And I think that it should start there, you know, and of course women in films. That's kind of, you know, the responsibility of the film programmers to make sure that these things get seen, but it's not our responsibility to ensure that these things can get made.
Can I come in on that point though, Seán? Because I mean, we all know the terrible history of how gay people were treated in this country, and the necessity of gay film festivals in telling stories of people's experiences here and abroad. But is there a danger in the success of those festivals that you marginalise yourselves? And is it a challenge as a programmer to try and draw in a wider audience, or even, dare I say, try and bring cinema like this to the mainstream?
Well, I think there's two approaches for that question. Well, you know, I've been empathizing with heterosexuals all my life, you know, in every single film that I've ever seen. So trust me, it's not that hard for me to look at, you know, a romantic comedy of two gorgeous straight people falling in love and not be like, oh my God, how beautiful. Because it's expected that I should be able to understand what life is like for the majority of people. And I completely agree with that. But there seems to be a kind of a free pass that, you know, let's just use LGBT cinema since this is my area. Like, there's kind of a pass that the majority of people are expected to have, where they're like, well, I know, I don't actually understand that world, so I'm not going to engage with it, you know? I think any quality cinema goer should look at our festival and think, oh, this film was in Berlin, this film was in Venice, this film was in London. I've heard about this. Here's my opportunity to see it either in the cinema or on an online platform that we're working with this year, you know? Like, yes, I want as many people to see these films as possible. I think it behooves the audience of gays to get their straight mates to say, come on, I've got something to show you. And it behooves that person to say, yeah, I'm going to go with you, I'm going to look at it. The other side of things is that if LGBT films didn't exist, well, then you're relying on the majority to represent you in the first place, okay? Now, a major film festival, I totally understand. They, in many ways, you know, they have a hard job too, because they have their own diversity drives, but they're also bigger, and they also need to kind of put their arms around every kind of cinema that's out there. And if you're a film like Cannes or Venice or Toronto or something, you know, Toronto being a good example, films in Toronto are, yes, you get your little small independent films, but you also get films that go on to win Oscars a few months later, do you know? So they have much more of a commercial responsibility for what they program, you know. But let's say the major film festival of any country, be it DIF or be it Cork or something, you know, I know, and Granya's participating in this, and we've had a few conversations, you know, I know that, like, you know, I don't have to worry that the head of a program in, you know, in Ireland is not thinking about, or is thinking about representing me, because I know that will be there. But the problem is that we're talking about 1, 2, 3 films here, okay? And that's not a slight against them. That's talking about in the grand scheme of a larger program, okay? So in an LGBT film festival, what you get the guarantee that you're going to have a common theme amongst all these films, which is kind of a foundation of a particular gender or sexual viewpoint. But what you're also going to get, which is the responsibility, you know, for me as a programmer, is we're going to get films from Brazil, we're going to get films from the USA, of course, we're going to get films from the Black perspective. We're going to get, you know, insights of documentaries from countries where being LGBT is still dangerous or illegal, do you know? It's like, you get something foundational, but you also get everything else at the same time. So the answer is no, I don't think there's a risk of marginalizing ourselves. We are always going to be a minority, and that's the way it is. And whether it's commercial sponsorship, whether it's art sponsorship, you know, we have to, if we're having a commercial sponsorship, you know, ours is Accenture at the moment. You know, I would love if it was Jameson. I know lots of gay people who drink Jameson, you know. While they're taking a break from Diff, why don't they come sponsor us for a while? Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that's not for, I unfortunately don't have that power to make that happen, you know?
Yeah. Loads of really interesting points there, Seán. Thank you. And we might jump back to some of them maybe in our question and answer session a little later. Actually, we'll start bringing in questions from the panel, from our participants shortly. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask or an issue they'd like raised, drop us a line in the chat box. Susan, sorry, you want to come in there? Susan, you're muted. We can't hear you. Don't worry.
Can you
Hear you now.
hear me now? Yeah. No, it's. I suppose there's two things. It's preferable to me that communities would be able to tell their own story. That's preferable to me. So it's preferable that, for instance, Demi, that you would be able to do what you're, you know, as you say, writing, or that you would direct. But I know that in some cases that takes time. I know it even from women who are absent in areas, like you could do something about writer, directors and producers.
Yeah.
You can't really immediately do something about cinematographers, about a camera department, because sometimes you don't have the capacity, so you have to go that way. So you know there might be an argument which says, well, there are not enough there are not enough Black people in the country to tell their own stories yet, or they're not trained in film, whatever. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I don't know. But what I really can't understand, because there's no reason for this, is why when filmmakers are telling stories about our world, the Ireland that we see when we open the front door, why those voices and those faces are missing. I don't get that. I really don't get it. And I mean, you're even looking at, occasionally if you're looking at a short film, you'll see sort of someone pass the screen, and it's like as if someone said, you better get somebody, a bit different looking in. But I don't get it. I have to say that I'm surprised. I wondered, I mean, do you feel that as well? That there's no reason for that?
When I first started off, and I can only speak from my experience.
Yeah.
When I first started off, I went to all these events. I went to a lot of RTE launches. I do a lot of RTE social media stuff, for the player and so on. But I met this Black man, Nigerian man. He was a comedian. His name is Emmanuel. And we were talking away. We were doing something for the social media and for the player, and that was fine. And we'd finished, and we had walked out to the main door. And this content creator, he was an older man. He came up to us and he was like, do you know how refreshing it is to see people like Black people here? He was like, we don't see anything of it. And he went into a big tangent and he was like, when we do hear your stories, it's from a white person's perspective. So that means it's whitewashed. It's not really our stories. We suggest the idea, but it's not really 100% what we say. It's someone else's version. It's like I'm giving you a story, but you change, or a recipe, and you change it all up and claim it as your own. Before quarantine, I'm studying media in college as well. And we were talking about it, and we were talking about how a lot of radio presenters would bring two people with two different sides of a story and ask them to explain their story and give their opinions. But you always hear from the white person's perspective and not the Black person's perspective, for the reason being that they can't be asked to go get the Black person, or they just don't care. They want to hear a positive side. And sometimes it's ignorance, and sometimes it's not going to sell, because a lot of people who do listen to us or do watch television aren't Black, so they don't really care. And that's the most disheartening part of it. I hope that in the future, like you said, it would be nice to see some more Black directors and filmmakers and some cinematographers, whatever the case may be. I hope that we have that in the future, but we have to start in our community before we make it to the big screen. We should accept that there's more than just white people, and there's different minorities in a community, and hopefully that can translate to our TV screens, but only time can tell.
Now, you touched on something I did want to raise there, actually, because I feel like I'm a little bit guilty of it myself, and that is the area of unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Where just because traditionally not to make excuses for it, but I think maybe in Ireland traditionally, because we have been, you know, one race, and until maybe the last generation, that it doesn't even occur to people to consider other voices. As you said yourself, Linda wasn't a black character until you went into the room and you were too good.
Yeah.
So I wondered what your views are on that, and maybe yours as well, Stephanie, as an agent. You know, are you having to kick against that a little?
Before Stephanie steps in, I feel like it's not just black people. I know that I can only speak from my experience, but I live in a terrace where we have Polish, we have Russian, we have Lithuanian, we have people from the traveling communities who are almost ashamed to mention that they are whatever race or background they're from. And when it comes to television and when it comes to media, we start with the traveling community, because what I'm writing is based on a black girl and a traveler girl. With the traveling community, yes, they sometimes have a bad reputation, but like I said, it's one bad apple that ruins it for the bunch. It's always seen in the news or on television that, oh, this traveler did this, or this traveler is this, and that. When in actual fact, travelers and or black people are almost the same, because they are minorities and they do go through the same thing on a daily basis. They have stereotypes that they are trying to break away from, and like I said, there is bad apples that are ruining for them, but they're constantly shunned upon because of their stereotypes, which is unfair. I remember there was a documentary we were studying in college. John O'Connors was talking about the traveling community and how difficult it is for traveling men or traveler men with depression and so on, and mental issues and so on. And he was just basically talking about it. But when he went to get his acceptance speech there, was it for the IFTAs or so on? He was like, oh, he's just very aggressive, the way he talks, he's this and he's that. But instead of talking about the positives, the fact that he won an IFTA, the fact that he did do something so great and he shone a light on the traveling community, he was just disregarded because of the way he spoke, which isn't right. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's something, you see something so positive, but the negatives always seem to outshine the positives because of the minority or because of whoever it is, which is unacceptable.
Thanks.
You know?
And Stephanie, is Stephanie here? I can't see on my screen. She might have had to step out for a minute, has she?
Yeah.
What's your take, Susan, on the whole area of unconscious bias? Is it something we're guilty of? Is it something we need to be better at?
Oh, look, it is something we're all guilty of. It is something we're all guilty of. That said, and it is true, and I think you need to, I think we all need to, and I don't mean this in a pious kind of way, but we do need to all kind of, in a way, check in on ourselves every now and again, because we are all kind of steered a little bit in one direction rather than another. I think that's true. However, I do think that it's become something of an overused term in the film industry in the last few years. It's kind of like it's easier to accept that everything is unconscious bias rather than actually saying sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's actually discrimination. Sometimes it's misogyny. And I'm sure, Demi would say sometimes it's racism. So I kind of got tired of it. It's like, it's almost as though there was this collective sigh of relief when the scrutiny of the film board started, the film boards internationally started, the funders. It's as if they said, oh, thank heavens. In a way, we didn't know we were doing it. We didn't mean to be doing it. And, I think sometimes you did, mean to be doing it. That's not to say it's not still an issue, but I think it's a bit of a coverall. I think it's a bit of a coverall for everything.
Like, the way I see it is like, if you are a woman if you're a woman, first of all, if you're a man, no matter what your sexual orientation is, no matter what your background is, what your color is, you should be given a role based off your talents. You should be given a role based off your work. You should be given a role based off the good person that you are, or the respect. Not even respect. You should just be given a role because of your talent. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, if you're into men, if you're not into men, if whatever the case may be, that should not come into consideration. And when I hear of of like, if I see, for example, I've got, like I said, I can only really speak from my own experience. When I received the role for the Young Offenders, the amount of hate comments I had gotten just based off the color of my skin. At first, it was kind of like, right, okay, I've gotten that to my face before growing up. I'm kind of used to it. I shouldn't be used to it. Kind of used to it. I've got a thick skin. When I went away and did something that wasn't me playing a role, that was based off of me, which was Dancing with the Stars, I was the youngest contestant they've ever had in the franchise. The comments that I was getting was absolutely disgusting. And to think that these are older people, by the way, these aren't people of my age. These are women and older men who are like 40 to 50 years of age. It was disgusting. When this whole Black Lives Matter movement took off properly during quarantine, I had done an article with a newspaper, and they had posted it on their social media, and the comments, people didn't even read the article, but the comments that they'd seen was, it was absolutely disgusting. It should not be the way at all. You should not be criticized off your background or whatever the case may be. You should be criticized off your talent. If you're good enough. If you're not a good enough actor, that's grand. You get used to that, you take that on the chin, you keep moving. But you should not get discredited because of your background or whatever the case may be. Do you know?
I'm sorry that happened to you, and I think it's hard, isn't it, when you're, do you think, Demi, in that situation you were playing a character and you were more protected in a sense and by social media compared to when you went out being yourself in a different format? Or does it even matter? It just shouldn't happen, full stop.
Well, like when I first got given the role for Linda, of course, like I said, it wasn't in the script for her to be a Black girl. I was just given the role because of my talent, which I take that very proudly. I take that script, I'm very proud of that. But a lot of people were like, oh, she only got the role, that's not her real accent. She only got the role because she was paid €20 and was sent back to the jungle. She was this, she was that, she was this. I was like, grand, you know what, people are sour. They probably auditioned, they didn't get the part. That's your own problem. But when you go away and you're in a very vulnerable state, you're doing something that you've never really done before, you're very young, you're living out in this big city by yourself, and then to see all these older people discredit you just because it's just their form of entertainment, and then for you to accidentally come across it is disgusting. Like, it was times where I cried because like I said, I'm so used to being a character and hiding behind that blanket, that when that blanket is ripped off of me and I'm thrown onto a dance floor, it's a completely different environment, a completely different ballgame altogether. Do you know? It was very heartbreaking. It really was. I remember there was times I cried and everything because of it. But like, now I'm just like, that's my role. They criticize me because I'm Linda. That's their own problem. It doesn't really bother me. But like I said, when you're thrown away from, like, when you're taken away from your safety blanket and thrown into the deep end, it's a completely different ballgame. You know?
Yeah.
Can I just come in to empathize there? I mean, you know, here's the thing. I mean, we all use, racism. Yes, we know in this kind of abstract way it goes on. But isn't there something so shockingly powerful about hearing, Demi talk about it as it happened to her? I just think that maybe we're not connecting with the real voices somehow. We're kind of dealing with abstract concepts of, people who are subject to racism. But it's to hear you say that. I mean, to think that you had to put up with that, not only in a moment where you should have been thrilled at this opportunity, but just that you would experience it. It's dreadful. I was reading somewhere the other day, the first thing to say, I was thinking, Esther, when I knew it was coming on here, I was reading two reports actually. One of them just reminding us how there are many more male film reviewers than female film reviewers internationally. But also I think the BFI could be behind it, I'm not sure, where they're taking 3 or 4 young black people to put them through their paces and train them, if you like, as reviewers, because it's only until there are so many diverse faces and diverse voices across the industry, I think that something is going to shift and change. Because, and again, apologies if the language I'm using, I'm conscious of the fact that, of using language that's appropriate. And I think I'm maybe speaking as a generational thing here, where people just don't have the language sometimes. I know I've spoken to people just about the place, who don't even know if it's okay to say black person. So still think there's that, and some of that is it's nothing to do with evil, badness or anything. It's to do with people are struggling to be part of the conversation, and could have the very best of intentions. But I do think that the industry has to actually embrace in a very proactive way.
One of our Steve Hartland, who's here with us, makes a very salient and good point. And Steve, would you like to make the point yourself? Actually, if Shimmy can unmute you, would that be possible?
Yeah. First of all, congratulations, Demi, on securing the role, even though it was written essentially for somebody who was white Irish. And my point was that yes, roles should be given to people based on their talent, but firstly, the possibility has to be there that the character might not necessarily be white Irish, or might not necessarily be male or female. There's got to be more scope for those changes, and it shouldn't be so amazing like it was for you that you secured that role.
Yeah.
I was saying in a comment you might have seen that happened for my son a good few years ago. He was cast in Love Hate, and the character written was a young white guy, and he got the role mainly because the character played his mother, Mary Murray, fought for him and got the role. So, and that was many years ago, and I don't think it happens too often.
Yeah.
But like for black people to get a chance on screen, there has to be more writing that could include a black person in the character. And like you said, I mean, when you look, you go into your shopping centre, you go down the street, you see a mixture of different faces, different hues, and that's just not happening on screen and should be.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Grania, you might want to come in as well, because I think you have a case to make about the media having more of a role to play in promoting diverse films and casting, instead of writing about dinosaur films every week, which I might be a bit guilty of. So will you come in on that and say what you think the media could be doing?
Yeah, thanks, Esther and Shimmy, and good afternoon, everybody. It was just that I was very struck by, and I'm sure Seán has felt this as well, that you put together a programme, my working in the Dublin Film Festival, of multiple stories from multiple parts of the world. Many have emerging talent, and yet when they are pitched to media, it's described as unknown, unfamiliar, and therefore nearly irrelevant. And so I feel like that the media, unfortunately, can spend a lot of time basically focused on the same kind of usual suspects and refuses to possibly engage with a role where they can break new talent, bring new dynamic, different voices to the fore and to people's consciousness. And some fantastic performances I'm thinking about in foreign language films, and many times we've had actors and directors from different countries, but because English is not necessarily their first language, or that they're not familiar, or their subjects are considered, of the films are considered too small, they're not of interest. And it sometimes just feels, I can sense the frustration from people, and I would agree that sometimes not only there are some great things that are shown, but unfortunately that portal or that access point is also kind of shut off. The other thing is we had a fantastic Danish actress called Trini Dryholm came to the festival this year, and it was just a sidebar, but just to say to you that there was a national newspaper, didn't know who she was, and the editor just went, well, she's too old, nobody's seen anything that she's in, we don't care. And I think that's just a really interesting dynamic to know that there wasn't any interest. But I think it's changing, and I think there's been a really interesting upsurge since Black Lives Matters, and the whole way in which finally the media is beginning to understand the power of the different voices and the diversity. So I hope it can only just really be built into a lot of the media's editorial policies, as much as for the filmmakers and the commissioners, because I think they all kind of operate to bring audiences together so that audiences can ultimately see these films, these stories, whether or not they actually need, as I said, a kind of reference on the late or in a national newspaper or on a radio, because at the moment those people aren't getting to that particular platform in order to be a kind of advocate for their work. And I think that across all different, whether it's gender, whether it's class, ethnicity, it seems to be a kind of single block.
I agree with you, and we are guilty of the usual suspects, I would say, in the media. Not to make excuses, but I think traditionally when you're trying to get something past your editor, if that person's unknown, it can be really difficult to get the slot, you know. And the hubby would actually be screaming at me about that for years, about like he wants to read people on the up. He doesn't want to read a sanitized, boring, bland interview with Julia Roberts. He wants to know who's out there, you know. And I do think it's changing, though. As a freelancer, I'm finding it easier to pitch less mainstream talent, even to the popular media in recent times. Stephanie, maybe you could come in on that. You know, in your 3 years of experience in business here now, is it getting easier to, you know, persuade casting agents or producers to mix it up a little bit more and to look at different people to what they might have had a set view of a character in their minds?
Depends. It will depends of the casting director and the project I receive. But yeah, I mean, when I receive casting and if they actually specify they want white actors for it, I will send on everyone I think is suitable for the role. Even if it's a black actor or minority actor, I will send on everyone, because for me, it's like Demi, it's not about the skin color, it will be about the talent. And it would really depend. I'm not here to give names, but like as an example, one of the last project I received, they actually specified BAME actor based in Ireland. And I was really surprised about it. And also really excited because I got all of it. I was like, yes, this is what I'm working with. And then once you send the submission and everything, all the actors, then they will come back and say, no, they want BAME actor with Irish passport, which for me doesn't make sense. So it will depend. Like, I won't say it's getting easier, but I'll say 80% of the casting I will receive where they actually want BAME actor as main character or supporting main role are all in the UK. I'm still waiting for Ireland, you know, to be on that level, but it will depend of the project and casting director. But yeah, I mean, the media has a role to play, but, you know, as an agent, we also have a role to play. Like, we need to fight and push for it, even though we see, like, if they're looking for white actors or, you know, for a specific role, like, just think about the talent first instead of the color of the skin. So it will depend, like I said.
And Stephanie, I'm high-fiving you for issuing that response every time you get asked for a white actor. That's a brilliant way of nudging back. But I'm interested to know, does it get results? Does it push people to broaden their consideration?
I will insist on that and ask them to at least see a tape. And from there, you know, they can make the decision, because my job will be done. And then it will be like the actor's job to do his part. So once they will see a tape, then they can come back and say, yeah, no, it's not right for the role, but thank you so much. Or give me a proper feedback, and then we can work on it and improve about it. But yeah, like sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not, because they'll come back and say, as the breakdown said, we're actually looking for a white actor for that role. So
it's brilliant, though. I wondered, Claire, Claire Lloyd, might you unmute yourself? Because I think you're making a really important point about being from a working class background. And you say you're constantly irritated by the narrow representation of people from your background.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do love an inner city crime thriller in Ireland, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. I was working with another actress this morning who has a really similar background to myself. We were talking about this, and is that our background, our community is represented in two different ways. You're either feral or you're miserable. I had and especially the feral drives me fucking crazy, and it's something I'm really passionate about. I'm going to try not to cry about, because it seems to be that is through such a middle class lens. Oh, this is how working class people behave, like animals. Bullshit. No, we fucking don't. We educate ourselves, we look after our children, we look after our families, we want to work in good jobs and we can get to them. We want to eat as well as we can. And there's also this other thing that irritates me, that working class people are perceived to be desperately thriving and striving to achieve a middle class life, and it drives me mental. There's nothing wrong with not coming from an upper middle class Trinity background. Because guess what? Here's the thing. Most of the world aren't that. That drives me mental. Also, I would like to raise the points too, that people are never just one thing. So we want to talk about maybe a little bit about intersectionality, because people can be black and gay and a woman and working class. And those different things, all the things that we're talking about, will affect that specific person in a different way. So people are going to have to deal with like misogyny and racism, which takes on a whole different kettle of fish, because it's from like even within their own community and then from like exterior communities. So that's another point. And also, so I have a certain level of privilege being a white woman. So like what can we do, the people with privilege? What steps in Ireland, specifically in our context, what can we do to help make space that should be there already but isn't? What can we do to help, without it being like, like a condescending kind of a thing? What can we do in our power to help? That was a lot. Sorry.
Hi Claire, I absolutely love you. I think you're brilliant. Was it like with this whole Black Lives Matter, and maybe it's because I'm a lot younger, and I'm not saying that you're old. I'm just saying that I'm a lot younger. I'm only 20. With this whole Black Lives Matter, the first thing people did was go on social media, and you did this like. I knew a few people personally, I'm not going to say names, who sat down and were like, yeah, we want to help you use your voices. No, that's your first mistake. We want you to hear our voices. I've been shouting. I just need you to actually turn on the hearing aid and listen to what I've got to say. That's the first thing. We want to understand. Okay, in order to understand, you don't need to go away and read stuff on a website. No, scratch that. Listen to people. Just listen to people, listen to the voices, there's videos, there's articles, listen to actual people and not listen to statistics. Yeah, they're helpful and they can give you more of an insight once you have the information and once you've heard stories. Like with this whole Black Lives, I said, I spoke about it, I got absolutely annihilated, and I promised myself that I wasn't going to sit down and do a video about it, because I wasn't going to be like everyone else, because I've spoken about it for so long and I felt like a broken record. So in order for, if you feel like you're privileged, most people are privileged, we just want you to listen and listen to our stories and listen to the difficulty, stuff that you may not have even noticed. Like, for example, you hear a lot of fellas at a workplace who make jokes about the black fella and how great he is at sex and so on. To you, it's a joke. To him, it's like, it's a rude because they're bringing it up. It's a topic of conversation constantly. I hear it when I was in school. I hear it when I'm at work. I hear it when I'm on a night out. I'm sick of it. It's a joke at the start, but then it gets annoying, and then it's like you're just being disrespectful. Just listen to our stories, and then you'll be able to understand our difficulties and just, I don't know, it's just listen. It's just the main thing, just listen and understand. You may not even notice it at the start, but once you hear the stories, you'll be able to notice, right, that was rude. Yeah, I can understand why you think that's rude. It's like insulting a woman over her weight. Your joke, it might be a joke at first, and they might just awkwardly laugh it off, but then it's like, all right, now you're bringing up that I'm fat every day when I'm eating a burger. Like, that's just rude. Do you know what I mean? Just listen. That's the main thing, is just listen.
And Jasmine makes a very interesting point on what you're saying there, Demi, is not only to listen, but to examine their bias.
Yeah, and you need to be brave to do that, to not only examine it, but speak it out, go, oh shit, yeah, you know, to share it.
Yeah.
As well, so other people can do it the same.
Okay, can I just say, just on what Demi has said there, you know, I think just with my experience, I've just got into acting as an older woman. It's something I've always wanted to do. But when I was younger, I knew that there was I experienced so much racism in the country that I had to leave. Now that was at a time where that was unspoken and not aware of. So what is good about today is that people are more aware, but a little bit like what Seán said, there's the symptoms. And until the symptoms, and I think Susan, I think it was you, Susan, who said around, the unconscious bias, all of these words, and while they have a truth in them and they're very, important that we examine, until people, every individual, all of us, really are authentic and examine our bias, nothing will ever change within the industry. That's my perception. People may mean well, we may have all the funding, we may have this course, this educational system, we bring in, all the different types of people in to encompass diversity. But until we really, really authentically look at our bias, because that's in Ireland especially, we look at other countries, we look at the UK, we look at America, okay, yes, there are similarities and we can learn a lot. But we're actually in a very unique position here. I grew up as a woman of colour in this country with a few other people, very, very few. And we're in a really unique position now that we do have diversity of many people and not just of colour. And of colour also, can I say, means a lot of different colour. It also includes Asian and various other people. So where am I going with all of this? My point is that we're in a unique position, but nothing will change in Ireland unless we really, and that's a big thing to do that, to bring in our own bias, to really examine what that is, because it is in white Irish society, it's embedded. It's deeply, deeply embedded. I have a lot more to say around that because I work in other areas around the race side. So yeah, that's all I think I have to say right now. Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Jasmine, you came up with a good point there when you said that it's not just Black people, which is true. There was a video going around there, was it last week and the week before, of this Asian woman being literally pushed into a pond and was heard a lot of racial abuse because of this whole corona thing. Racism, and I want to make this the topic, my mother is white, my stepmother is white, my brothers are mixed race. Racism is not just white versus Black. Racism is not just white versus Asian. It's not, it's more than just that. When you say you want to eliminate racism, that means you want to make everyone equal. So when people hear, oh, Black Lives Matter, people are like, why should Black people be more superior to white people? No, at the moment, at the moment, Black people are, and unfortunately there is other races, but Black people are just the topic as of right now. They are dealing with so much discrimination and so much hatred that they are not even seen as equal. They are below the threshold, which is it's disgusting and it's unfair and it's diabolical. We want to be seen as equal with everyone else and with every other race and so on. And that is the main thing. And I want people, I've said it so many times, I've said it in so many interviews, I want that to be something that people take away with. And when you do say Black lives and equality and so on, that includes people of the LGBT plus communities, that includes people with disabilities, it includes everyone. Everyone is to be seen as equal, not just colour. And I want that. I hope that doesn't get missed or thrown away. I just want that to be seen as the main focus throughout this whole diversity panel.
Yeah, and I think that's obvious. I don't think that it is that, but I think until a little bit like I also agree with what Claire said around the working class.
Yeah.
And that that comes back to what she said, people looking through the lens. They're looking through the lens of their life and their experience. And that is valid.
Yeah.
And appropriate. However, when that's just the one thing that's seen all the time, and from my experience growing up, that's what I've seen that is being seen all the time. And it's extremely tiring now. It's extremely boring. So, yeah, so hopefully there's, changes. because they take time. No matter how well-meaning people are, it takes time.
Yeah.
You know?
I want everyone to feel heard here, and I'm conscious of the clock working down against us. But Tara, would you like to come in and make the point that you've made here on chat?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you for bringing in kind of the Asian side, and as I'm from Indian origin, sometimes there is confusion about briefs because, you know, usually it would be kind of the black or the white, and, you know, sometimes Indians and other Asians do get confused as to where we essentially fit into the brief. So that's just the point that I wanted to make, and I hope that, you know, they do keep people of colour, of all colours, kind of in the loop around castings and writing and just in general.
Yeah, it just reminds me, thanks Tara for that comment. It's just like, this is what I meant earlier by saying that, like, diversity is not a monolith, and it's very important that, you know, right now with the Black Lives Matter movement that's taking place, that we're all becoming, you know, more aware than we have been, and, you know, kind of deeper understanding begets hopefully deeper understanding in general. But, like, you know, that's what I was saying about diversity is not just one thing. It's so, I think the Asian experience and the Irish Asian experience is not something we should not ignore either. And I'm just thinking about, I've been thinking about the films that we're programming in Gaze, you know, and we have the East Asian experience there, and it's just important that, like, you cannot. And actually, I feel bad now if I didn't even mention disability earlier when I was talking about things. Is that, like, it's such an important thing. And so I guess my biggest point that I'm trying to make is that you know, we cannot think about a plurality of stories in a monolithic terms. That's all.
Esther, can I come in? Yeah. I suppose it's, in a way, it's indicative how there aren't enough of these discussions, or they're starting to emerge, in the sense that there's so many different issues being discussed and bandied around and so on, all of them fascinating. But some of the discussion, it seems to be around individual responses and racism. And that's all true. I totally get that, and I understand, and it's important. But really what I just want to come back to for a minute is, how do you encourage this diversity of voice in Ireland now with the structures that we have? And I would say that we're lucky in Ireland to have public funders. It's not that they give you everything that you want, but it does mean that they can be lobbied. They can be approached. They can be said, what are you doing with the taxpayers' money? You know, so it's a way forward that brings the organizations that can actually encourage and expedite change, that can bring them on board the conversation. Now, at the minute, these are two things that don't seem very maybe significant, but I think they are in a longer shot. So, for instance, at the moment, I and two colleagues are involved in BAI research that they have funded into the extent to which stakeholders have implemented gender equality and diversity, given everything that's been going on over the last few years. Now, I think that's a very important piece of research. Is it going to change things tomorrow? No, but it's going to it's going to prompt that discussion with stakeholders to see, is there anything happening? Or to what extent have people really signed up, or are people just nodding out there? So I think that's important. The other thing, and I don't know where this is going to lead, but the changes to Section 481 include that skills development plan. And I don't know if it's going to be much good, but the requirement will be that if you apply for public money to Screen Ireland, you have to outline what it is that you have. Where's your gender and diversity plan? What have you done? What are you prepared to do? All of those kinds of questions. Now, they may amount to a hill of beans, I don't know, but it is a good start, I think. And because you have to actually interrogate the broader industry because we could be talking for 10 years about what's right and correct, and actually on the ground there may be very little happening. So it's not going to change things tomorrow or the day after, but I think those bigger questions are really important. And the other thing that I would say is, and I can only speak sort of drawing on my own involvement here as well, when gender became a problem as I saw it, I'm not saying that others, you know, didn't see it prior, or that, but you know, you start to agitate and you find similar people to bandy together with, and you start to knock on doors and ask why. And I think that kind of organizing is very valuable. And I just wondered whether Demi, you, for instance, or Jasmine, whether there are any such groups, or whether Stephanie, you're involved in anything like that. I probably a different thing, but I think the people who want change and who have every justification in expecting that public money will be supportive of them, the organisation of those demands, I think, is very important always.
We have a few non-video participants who are making some really interesting points I'd just like to read out, if that's okay. Barbara says, "This is so refreshing. Thank you so much for organising it." Hats off to you, Shimmy. "I was told once by some big fish from the industry that I should be realistic, as we don't see people like me on screen here, and maybe consider moving to Portugal or Spain. I'm from Brazil. It's sad because it's true. I've been here for 8 years and I wouldn't like to move, but Ireland is so behind the USA and the UK in terms of representation. If you don't look Irish or have an accent, it's usually a no-go for big productions. When you do get a role, they're biased, so you usually play the au pair, the prostitute, or the sexy girlfriend." That's a very salient point, Barbara. Thanks for making that. Anne says, "My casting dilemma is the fact that though I identify as white and I technically don't fall into the BAME category, I'm somewhere in the middle, too tanned or foreign for a lot of Irish roles I read in scripts and casting breakdowns, yet not foreign enough for the roles that are written specifically as foreign characters. It's frustrating, as I feel the only roles I could end up booking are for characters without any family members. It makes it easier to cast me if you don't have to find a family that look like me, or characters that are written as foreign to begin with. In fact, for American British projects, I take for many more roles than I do for projects taking place in Ireland. This problem doesn't seem to exist for UK or US projects at all." And Derek says, "Black writers have stories that shouldn't be limited to just asylum seeking. I believe we all have stories that aren't in one box of audience expectation." That's 3 people raising similar points there about casting. Maybe Stephanie, would you want to come in on that, in terms of, like, are we placing characters into certain boxes? And I think Claire, even in terms of working class, you've made that point as well. Stephanie, is it changing? Are we getting better at that? It doesn't sound like it.
No, we're not getting better at that in Ireland. Like I said, the main role for BAME actors, you'll see that coming from UK or US or anywhere else in Europe, but not here. They will look for BAME actor, I will say, for one-liner role, 2-line maybe, not even a whole scene. So it's not changing for now here. So that's why I was saying that I will still push, for any BAME actor I will represent, because it shouldn't be limited to that only. So there's still a long way to go, but I'm optimistic about it.
Seán, I mean, you've had the benefit of, I think you called yourself binational at the start of all this, but you've had the benefit of spending many years in the UK, which I would think are a generation ahead of us, maybe, in terms of how they treat gay people, in terms of race, in terms of racial integration. What do you see doing in the UK that we could learn from here?
I think there's more initiatives. I think there's initiatives that are led from filmmakers themselves. I think there's more funding bodies who are willing to take a punt on these things. And I think there's more money. Let's be honest about that as well. Do you know, like BFI Flair, which I used to work with, which is formerly the London Lesbian Gay Film Festival. It's the biggest one in Europe. And even by size of compared to the London Film Festival, it's much smaller. But they, an awful lot of work goes into it, funding from various bodies, and also money from the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Now I know the Arts Council give money over here, but it's a combination of things. There's more initiatives, but also I think there's more of an infrastructure as well, in terms of the film industry is bigger, first of all. And so I know short filmmakers who have kind of took the bull by the horns themselves and have set up various initiatives I think the Uncertain Kingdom was one of them, that kind of was 20 short films by 20 diverse filmmakers, kind of responding to the climate of the UK at the moment. So yeah, it's an infrastructural thing. I'm a real pragmatist at heart, and that's very much where I come from when I talk about these things. Is that like you can have all the ambition and hope that you want, but you can't will these things into existence if the foundations for them are not there in the first place, or if you don't take a step back and say, oh, why can't this exist? Do you know? Like I know Susan was talking about the POV scheme earlier, but my predecessor at Gaze is a producer on the POV scheme, and I think the idea, and obviously those films are a bit on hiatus at the moment because of COVID and stuff. Yeah. But like the idea that we'll get that the Screen Ireland has an initiative in which a writer, director, and a producer of a film, feature film, are female. I think that in itself is actually brilliant. And that's addressing it, at least from my perspective as an outsider. This is it's all about the optics as well. I think that is brilliant, and I commend Screen Ireland, called the Irish Film Board there, so it's my age as well. I commend them for doing that, and Screen Skills Ireland is also participating in Gaze this year, for filmmakers, and this is the first time that we've been working with them. And I'd also want to give credit. We have pending applications with the Department of Equalities and Integration. I can't remember the name of it, but like I have to say that from the top down, these changes are happening. It's just that I'm a pragmatist. These things are all incremental, and we just have to be the ones to push for change. So, why don't you all buy a ticket to something at Gaze in September so we can push the statistics on them later. Or Esther, if you want to talk to me, at some point later on, talk. I'm more than happy. If they can wheel me out whenever they need to, I can talk for quite some time. It's all about the visibility as well. So, but the media are the custodians of visibility, and it all links up, and that's why I'm a pragmatist about these things.
And you're quite right to call me out. I shouldn't be waiting for the next Moonlight to come out to be writing about cinema.
Could I just acknowledge Screen Skills Ireland as well, which I had in my note to myself but forgot. And I may have said it, maybe I'm repeating myself. Screen Skills have funded, have given money to Raising Films Ireland and are funding the initial interrogatory research that's required for us to go forward. So I would like to just acknowledge that as well. Very helpful.
Thanks, Susan. I'm conscious of time and people's time, but also conscious that maybe there's some of you out there who have questions or points to make. If you want to just raise your hand and unmute yourself and come in. Otherwise, we're all good, I think. Otherwise, I'll go back. Susan, then, where do we solve all this? Where do, I can feel the frustration in the room here, and maybe even a bit of anger and a bit of righteous anger, I think. Where do we go from here? What do we need to be doing?
Well, look, I don't know if the point I made earlier was actually heard, but I think it's the most important point that I could make at the minute. I think anger is good. I'm not talking about storming, government buildings necessarily type of anger, but, unless you are actually conscious of injustice being done and are angry, what's the spark to move forward? It's not there. That's my own personal experience in anything. So I suppose what I'm saying is we are lucky to live in a country, at least, where there is public funding. And we are taxpayers, and therefore there is a way in to say, hang on a minute, what can you do for us? Now, I've given you two broad examples how Screen Ireland and the BAI are making investigations on what's going on. But, and I think that would be very valuable information, and I commend both, even though we're not sure how the Spring Ireland skills development plan, we're not sure how all that will go, but it's positive. But what I'm saying is, you know, there was nobody asking about gender until someone asked about it, and until someone joined forces, a number of someones, and said, we're going to ask these questions formally. So I'm a great believer in that kind of, you know, that kind of, what is the word for it? You know, like positive action, if you like. And yes, you could argue that I can speak for you, Demi, I can speak for you, Jasmine, and in a way, you know, I hope along the way I can. But there's nobody going to be able to speak for you as strongly, as authentically, as forcefully as you will speak for yourselves. So I am a great believer in organising, I have to say, in that way. And I think that's very important.
Susan, just on your point there, you said that, like, that I lost my train of thought. But basically what I'm trying to say is, do you feel as you're here representing, saying that we should have more women doing this and women doing this, which is obviously perfect and ideal, but do you feel like they're giving women opportunities just for the sake of it and not based off of their talents? Because I know personally, if I was to take this to the BAI or take this wherever, and I was like, I want to see more representation of people of colour, I want to see more representation of people of a different background and more minorities on television, do you feel like they're just going to cast you because there's a quota and you have to look at a quota?
No, in your dreams, actually. I don't think they're going to do that at all. Don't you worry, Demi. I think it's raising very legitimate questions. I mean, it's a different thing to say, hey, I want to make my own stories, and actually, I don't know how to use a camera. I have no skills for writing. I don't have any, you know. If you're starting from that, you know, there's different build-up involved. But if you're sort of saying, hang on, so while we all catch up in these skills that are so crucial for forging your own path ahead. And I'm talking about the Polish people, the Lithuanian, the travellers, all of those people ahead. While you're waiting for that, I don't see any reason why, if public funders are giving out money, that they can't say, we would like the Ireland that we currently live in to be represented in some way. So how are you actually representing diversity in your stories? You know, could this not be given to why does this have to be a white actor? Why cannot it not be an actor of colour? I don't see that that's an insurmountable thing. It seems very doable to me. But who's going to press and push? I mean, in our business, we're all talking here. We're all pressing and pushing in different ways because it is all about intersectionality in the widest sense. But who's going to press and push? I'm saying better than those people themselves. So that's what I mean. You know, that's what I mean.
I noticed Barbara, who spoke about the difficulty in getting castings as Portuguese, has put on her video. So I'm wondering, do you want to unmute yourself there, Barbara, and say hello?
So yeah, basically for me, it's a bit frustrating because I do have an accent, and then I can work around, you know, like the voice work, that kind of thing. But usually, if you don't look Irish, if you have an accent, as I do, it's really tough to get a job in the industry here. Like, I've done plenty of short films. I write myself, and then I usually get cast for like those that I said, you know, if it's like a bigger production or something like that. Even for ads, I was just now cast for a GPG ad, and I just got it because they're looking for someone international that looks really European kind of thing that they would play everywhere. So basically the commercial was in 19 countries. So I have this look that I don't look Irish, but I could be like, I don't know, Spanish or Italian or Portuguese, whatever. And so that was the reason. But if it's like something specifically Irish, and I don't get it, why do you need to look Irish to sell butter or milk? You know, it's just, I don't know. And even like First City, as you guys mentioned before, I have a friend who works there. I have a few friends, but one of them, he's Brazilian. And then he plays a guy from Chile, because it's usually then a country that, you know, like a small country or something that wouldn't be like a big an issue. Like, I don't know, sometimes people would have like this, or Brazilians, or I don't know, like so many of us here, you know, and there is no representation, as well as like Spanish people, Italians, like even my friends who are actors from the Black community, usually also same thing, a lot of prostitutes are the kind of thing, which is very frustrating. And then it's really refreshing when you see someone playing themselves or playing a normal person, because we are, you know, we are just like average, we're normal, really, you know, like just like, you know, like I don't know why really the prostitutes are the kind of thing. I'm also a journalist and I was working here for Archie, and why could I not play that, you know, something that I am a journalist and I was working for the TV here, why cannot play that as well, you know, like it's really frustrating that there are no roles for us. There are, and when there are, it's just because they wanted that representation, and it's like this biased kind of thing. So I don't know. I kind of are writing as well at the moment, so I have a little group that sometimes make short films and things like that, and indie features, you know, plays, but it's not like for big productions. I don't see much way out right now, unfortunately.
And Barbara, I think you raise a really interesting point within what you've been saying there, and maybe this would be something you could take up, Stephanie. The idea, congratulations on the casting, first of all, but like it is going to, what is it, did you say 17, 18 different countries? So, yeah. I mean, are we missing out as a filmmaking community here by not casting people of more diverse backgrounds, given that, you know, the ultimate dream now is to get the Netflix deal, to get the streaming deal, to create programming that goes to various corners of the world? Are we actually missing a beat there, Stephanie, do you think?
Yes, I think we're missing a lot, like because they need to understand like what diversity means, and for most of them it's all about ticking a box. You know, they will just talk about it, they will mention it on the breakdown, okay, we are open to any diverse actors and, you know, BAME actors and everything, but they never cast, you know, those actors. Like they will just go for casting, but they'll come back saying, okay, the accent is not good enough. There was always something. So for me, yes, I think we're missing out. So that's why it's also important to have our own people to write our own stories, because from there, maybe we'll start seeing a change here.
And I'm going to have to wrap shortly, but I'm going to leave one of the last words to some of our non-video participants, because they're flying in. Sadiq, I came in late, but this is so great to see something new in the industry. I love the talk about diversity that you don't see much in Irish film, especially with the writing side. And that's a good point. We've barely scraped on in terms of writing and creating. So much out there with all the different cultures. We need to step away from stereotype. And Esther James, that's a great name. I think we have to create roles for ourselves by writing our own stories. Again, making the point about writing. I know it's not easy, but it's the best way to make ourselves visible without being a token cast member. Just to finish up with you, maybe, Susan, the very important point raised there, isn't it? You can create your own work, as maybe women have had to do in the past, to be heard in the industry.
Yeah, because it's interesting listening.
Sorry to interrupt, Suzanne, but I really have to go now.
Stephanie, thanks so much.
Nice to meet you, Stephanie. I hope our paths will cross again.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. And
you've been brilliant. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Stephanie.
Bye.
Sorry, Esther. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the points are points that were made about women. Women were the prostitutes, the you know, the girlfriend, the person who wasn't even hardly credited in the script. I remember reading a mad thing, you know, busty blonde. I actually saw somebody write about that not too long ago. Busty blonde, you know what I mean? So yeah, we take all that we fall back on stereotypes and very limiting depictions. So I think that's a problem. that's what I suppose I'm returning to things I'm saying. You would hope that those who are writing about contemporary Ireland would pause for a minute. And I don't always think it's necessarily conscious that the exclusion isn't always conscious. I mean, I know I've said about unconscious bias being overkill on that, but sometimes maybe it's just a question of the writer stopping and thinking. Not to say that what the writer writes is always necessarily what is followed through in the production, of course, but you would hope that those existing professionals would be reaching out to create a landscape of inclusion. You would think that would be an attractive thing for a film, as you were getting at there, Esther, here and elsewhere. But I'm back to this, if you want to push the boat out, if you want to have us reimagine the landscape, if you want to reimagine your own landscape, there is nothing better than saying, we're going to jump in and do this ourselves. And yes, you can start with writing. You can start with writing because at least that something can be done without the production machine behind you. So I'm thrilled to hear Demi say that that was starting to write something. And also I would say, short films can be made on a very limited amount of money now. And, I don't know. Is that a way of getting faces and interesting themes and things out there, even if they're not, have a big budget or a glossy? It might be something to consider. At least you're entering into the arena that you want to become part of.
I'm going to leave it at that, and thank you so much to Susan and to Seán, to Demi and to Stephanie. You've been absolutely brilliant. Thanks to all our contributors. It's been an education, quite frankly, and I'm going to hand you back to Shimmy now. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists again, and for Esther as well, and for taking the time to share your own personal stories with us this afternoon. And Sinead, thank you.